common theme of the expulsion of Adam and Eve, and usually in those paintings, the subject matter is they're trying to convey sort of shame within the actual act of them being kicked out of Eden. And to me, I always thought it was interesting because I always found that we became more human after eating from the tree of knowledge. And so I guess my interpretation was sort of to have a more aggressively sexual nature, but also one that has no shame.
Can I get your artistic opinion?
An Adam and Eve theme with some overt sexuality, and I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like that with the like shedding of the skin is supposed to say something, but it's interesting, that's for sure.
The idea of gender roles and the idea of having a submissive or dominant person in a relationship, but it's also the idea that there's different versions of love, you know, tender love and BDSM and same-sex love, and there's all these ideas behind what sex and love and relationship could be.
I wanted to create something kind of uncanny, so the fingers, there's an extra finger on the hand, repeated this sort of finger shape to represent sort of a phallus and sort of a feather, and it also represents a breast at the same time. Extra arms as well to portray engulfing marks on the back to kind of represent like a transformation. This woman is maybe becoming a bird herself with these feathers. Kind of second bird here that's kind of hidden in. I wanted the bird to have this sort of gaze that sort of confrontational and not 100% friendly at all. When people find out you have a disability, they either support you or you sort of feel more isolated. So in this, I have the top figure is sort of sharing a knowledge with the bottom figure, but it is also being lifted and supported. You really need your friends, and no man is an island. I don't consider the phallus a generally like masculine symbol. I consider it also feminine because women use a phallus occasionally. So to me, this is another one of those instances of the uncanny where there's this penis here, but then there's also a line that references an erection. So there's that, and it sort of speaks to relationships, not just friendships.
So this image is sort of representative of some of the reasons why this highway is being four-laned. One of the main benefits of four-laning a highway, and when you have a traditional two-lane highway, there's often accidents on that highway. So this is sort of a real-life event, a real-life representation of what's happening on this highway with respect to accidents, and sort of one of the arguments or benefits for four-laning a highway.
I'm Gloria Pizio, and this is my work. The series is titled Venice, Not Venice. This is where people live. You see the decay in the buildings. We often think of Venice as this magical place. You really have to be watchful. It isn't this idyllic, quiet little tranquil gondola ride through the canals. Like it can be hazardous, as you can see with these boats coming across. Years ago, advertising was not allowed on the Grand Canals, and you wouldn't see billboards of any kind. But because the restoration efforts need to be funded, and funds were being depleted, they decided to resort to using billboards and to using advertising to help fund the restoration. So here you can see the restoration efforts, and this is a billboard that has been put on the front of the billboard. This would be facing the Grand Canal. These buildings aren't being restored. Off the main path, they are not, I didn't see very much effort to restore them. Well, it says your country does not exist. Venice really is coded for extinction in several ways, and it really has undergone transitions and is being affected by modern influences, and I wanted to document that.
What do you think of this one right here? Do you see anything? What do you think the artist was intending?
Okay, looking at the collection, it kind of looks in terms of like city planning or mapping because of the grids that you're putting on top of the images of these. So I just think of the idea of urban planning in terms of these like wide open spaces and how that kind of conflicts in terms of computer programs and visually trying to represent things versus how they actually appear.
And this is not one of the artists tonight, even though I thought it was.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's just basically a piece of bamboo with this is actually a paint pen. It's still a marker, but it has a felt tip on it. I'm not going to take the lid off because it tends to leak with paint, but you know, it's needed a big piece to fill up some space, so it's basically why we did it. And once again, it has the Pickett building in there. The Pickett building is an iconic Hamilton building. A lot of people recognize it as an interesting. I think it's Art Deco. Interesting look to it. Very unique. Drawing in negative on these things rather than drawing with black on white. You're scratching away the surface and you're revealing white underneath. And they were done to illustrate a story by Denise Lisson, the author. She wrote Parker Burns mystery, so she has to be illustrate those.
Is this a significant industrial location?
Of days gone by, I would say the brickyard business is probably, it's been there, that brickyard since the 1920s. It's surrounded by residential.
Representational art, and that's art that's recognizable, it has recognizable objects in it. Often it just relies on that, so the composition's off, or they're not using color, or they're not using the other elements of design effectively, but because it looks like what people think it should look like, that's all that matters. But for a non-objective or an abstract painter, you really have to have your composition work, because you're not giving the public anything to hang on to otherwise, right? They should be able to just look at it, and without knowing anything about art, they should be able to know that it works or it doesn't work. That it balances, that it's harmonious, that it's got a definite focal point where I want your eye to go, that it travels throughout all of the parts that make a good layout. I am known as a non-objective painter, and what that means is that there is no recognizable subject matter in my paintings, which invites the viewer to subjectively participate and see what it is that they get from the paintings. I specifically start with the composition. For example, where do I want the focal points to be? Where do I want you to look first? I want you to look here, and then possibly come over here, and down here and to here. So I'm manipulating. So I pick a color palette, I determine what my composition for the layout is going to be before I start, and then it goes from there. After that, I try and stop thinking, and I work intuitively. So I just have to shut my mind down and just let it happen. as opposed to planning out each section of it and visualizing what it's going to look like at the end. I don't do any of that.
We were just jamming there, having a little fun. Ready to do an actual?